Everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing, I guess, all of the books that I had to read this semester. And there's a lot. If you can see this over here, you can't really see the biggest pile, but they're over here. And there's still a book that I haven't even finished yet, but I figured I should get this done before finals, because basically as soon as finals is here, I have to return all the books, so anyway. I've only really had to read books for 2 of my classes, nature writing and magical realism, and for nature writing I've only had to read 2, which is still a lot. It's still a lot. So for nature writing, the first book I had to read is this, the Norton Book of Nature Writing. It's an anthology, I guess is what it's called, you know, a collection of stuff. So it's a lot of short stories, most of it's non-fiction, I believe, about nature, essentially. So there's old stuff, there's Thoreau and Walden, which is ancient, but there's also more contemporary stuff, from people who are still alive, you know. But it's actually kind of interesting. A lot of the more contemporary stories are very interesting, and there's one by Terry Tempest Williams, who was born in 1955, called The Clan of One-Breasted Women, which is about breast cancer and nuclear poisoning, how they're doing all those nuclear tests out in Nevada and stuff a while ago. You know, essentially it's a very interesting genre. If you're interested in checking out, it's very good. I don't think it's an expensive book. I just rented it, so I don't know. But it is very nice. Some of the older stuff is boring. I don't like Thoreau, I don't like Walden, so that was kind of boring. But like I said, the more contemporary stuff is actually very interesting to read, and it helps give, I think, different perspectives on nature in general. So, I don't know, not a bad book. Also for nature writing, and now the sun's gone, but I have light, so it doesn't matter. This is by Cormac McCarthy. It's The Road. I think this book itself is pretty recent. They made a movie out of it, which so far I saw half of it, and it looks pretty true to the book, so if you'd rather see the movie instead, yeah, 2006 is when this was published, so it's 12 years. It's not that recent, but it's still recent. And it's a post-apocalyptic dystopian type novel following a man and his son. And that's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, it's very cool. Like I said, I've seen the movie. I've seen half of the movie because we were watching it in class, and it's very interesting. I guess it stays close to the book, so if you would rather watch something than read it, but this is very simple. It's very simple prose. There's not a lot of big words, I guess. It's very simple, straight to the point. There's no chapters, it just goes on in one long thing. And yeah, it's very interesting. I read it. I kind of spaced it because I didn't have the time to read it all, but I wanted to just keep going, you know. But it's very good. I would probably out of all the books I'm going to say, I'd probably recommend this the most. Like I said, it's simple, easy to read, and very, very interesting as far as dystopian, novels go. Moving on to my magical realism class. These are 5 books I've had to read. There's still one that I haven't read yet. Like I said, it's called As Close to God or something like that. It's by Ana Castillo, but I haven't read it yet. But these are the 5 that I have read. Where are they? And I'm going to tell you about them. If you don't know what magical realism is, here's a very brief and probably not entirely factually correct summary. Magical realism is essentially the mixing of magic with real. However, Harry Potter does not qualify as magical realism because there's set rules for magic and reasons why this happens and this happens and this happens. For example, in 100 Years of Solitude, this thing called the Plague of Insomnia happens where people can't sleep for years. And there's no explanation behind it, it just exists and people accept it. That's kind of the rough difference between fantasy books and magical realism, is strange things happen, but they're not usually questioned and they're not given rules or defined by anything. It's just, it happens. In another book, a character, Clara, has kind of telekinesis, can kind of make things move with her mind, and it's not really called telekinesis, and it's not really referred to as like that kind of a thing. It's just kind of accepted. So that's kind of the difference between, like I said, fantasy and magical realism. So if you're interested and you like those kinds of things, I would definitely check it out. A lot of magical realism, especially the ones I've been reading, are deeply rooted in history. Like, you're never going to know exactly when it takes place, and maybe not even exactly where, but especially in like this book and in a few of the other ones, there's key events that point to a specific thing that happened in history. So if you're kind of a history buff, you might really like magical realism books. The first one I had to read is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This one was not my favorite. It's probably not my least favorite, but my probably second least favorite out of the 5 that we've read, because it was just weird, and the family tree is hard to follow. Everyone's named Jose Arcadio or Aureliano. There's 2 names. It's Jose Arcadio and Aureliano, and you're named one of those or both of them somehow. There's Aureliano Jose, and then there's Remedios. There's like 3 Remedios. There's a bajillion Aurelianos and Jose Arcadios, and it's just like, which one are we talking about? It's kind of confusing. If you can follow those, go right ahead. I had a lot of trouble. And there's also a lot of like uncomfortable things that happen. Like, I mean, in other books there's uncomfortable things, but like uncomfortable things that are supposed to make you think. Like I said, an event, like there's a book that I'm going to talk about that talks about slavery and stuff, and those are uncomfortable things, but you're supposed to think about those. I'm talking about like really uncomfortable things, like this dude wanting to sleep with his mother. Okay, it's not my favorite subject, obviously, but the concept of it is good. I didn't like it as a first book that we had to read, but it was okay. Like I said, if you like, I know he's done a lot of other books, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, so if you like his books, I would recommend reading this. I don't know if this was made into a movie, but I heard if it was, actually I think he said he didn't want it made into a movie. I think. But anyway, I don't know. It is definitely interesting, just not my favorite. Next one we had to read is Arabian Nights and Days by Naguib Mahfouz. I don't know, it's Naguib, I think it's Naguib or something, Mahfouz. I did my project on this book, I'm doing my final project on this book. It's not my favorite. It's probably 100 Years of Solitude and this are like my least favorite. I know I'm doing my project on it, but it's like, the names were a little confusing because everyone in this has like 3 names. There's Sanan al-Gamali, Gamasa al-Bulti. I'm sorry, I know I'm butchering these like Arabian names, but it's kind of, it was short. It was a short read, which is good, but it's kind of a sequel to 1001 Arabian Nights, if you know what that is. Essentially, it's age-old stories of the king, Shahryar. Yeah, the Sultan Shahryar, his wife, I think, cheats on him and he kills her. And then he goes on this rampage of marrying every like girl in the kingdom and then killing her on their wedding night. So, to put a stop to this, he marries his like advisor's daughter, Shahrazad, and she tells him 1001 stories. So every night she's like, well, listen to this story, and he's like, oh, I guess I can't kill her, I gotta hear the end of the story. So then it goes on, obviously, for 1001 nights, until eventually he's like, I love you, let's actually get married for real, and I will promise I won't kill you. So that's kind of how 1001 Nights ends. This is Arabian Nights and Days. It's kind of a sequel to it, like I said, where Shahryar and Shahrazad are in it, and they're kind of like background characters. This focuses more on like the townspeople, and it focuses on genies, which I kind of like, or the jinn, whatever. But it was, I like that. It's interesting. Sometimes it's hard to follow. For me, the language was sometimes hard to follow with what was happening. Like, someone would say something and then I wouldn't understand until 3 pages later to be like, oh, they're being executed. And I was like, oh, okay, huh, huh, huh. Then I have to go back, but it's interesting. If you liked 1001 Nights, if you've like read 1001 Nights, you might enjoy this a lot. I think it's cool. Mahfouz is a pretty cool author. It's definitely interesting. It definitely deals with a lot of cool themes, but it's more, I would say this is a bit more magical than 100 Years of Solitude because there's things like genies and stuff like that. But anyway, I didn't like this that much, but you know, it is and I've obviously liked it enough to do my project on it. So the next book is Isabel Allende's House of the Spirits. This was made into a movie with Meryl Streep and a couple of other actors who I can't remember, but I've never watched it. And I think we were talking about how that movie was like okay as far as the novel goes. So this one was interesting. This one was kind of not like a hard read maybe, but this one definitely focused a lot on historical events, and it follows basically three generations of women, Clara Alba and Clara, Blanca, and Alba, grandmother, mother, daughter, and it kind of follows the three of their lives, and just talks a lot about what's happening. Like I said, this is the book where Clara has kind of like supernatural like powers kind of, and she can predict things. She predicts that like her sister's gonna end up dying, which does happen very early on in the book, but this one was very interesting. I like it a lot. It's not my favorite, but it is very good. House of the Spirits. I think I mentioned this. Did I mention this in my current favorites? I thought I mentioned this in something. But yeah, it's very good. It's not my favorite out of the ones I've read so far. The next two I like a little more, but this is still very good. It's bigger. It's definitely longer than Arabian Nights and Days. But yeah, it's different, like I said. And there's the main dude, like it's the story of three women, and then there's the main dude who's like the husband to Clara, father to Blanca, and grandfather to Alba. And it kind of, the story not really like revolves around him, but there's a lot to do with him. Esteban Chureba or whatever, and he's just kind of a jerk, but I don't know. It's definitely very interesting to read. There's a lot of different perspectives in here to do with war and stuff. Like I said, this one is very historical as opposed to like Arabian Nights and Days and even 100 Years of Solitude. This one is very, deals a lot with political things that happened around the time this took place. And it was actually like around the time, it takes place, like when Isabel Allende wrote it, there was a lot going on. I think, or like she was going through a lot. I forget where she, was it Chile? I don't know. Anyway, this book is very good. We have Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. This is the dude who did what are they called? The Satanic Text or whatever? Anyway, I don't know affiliation. I've just read this book. This book was very interesting. The beginning of it was kind of hard to get into, but after you get past like the beginning, it's very interesting because it's he's telling, like, the main character Salim is telling you this story as he's writing it down, as he's also telling it to his girlfriend, wife, whatever, of the time. So like there's a time when he's like, I'm talking about this, but this reminds me of the time when, but I'll come back to that later. And you're like, but I want to know what you're talking about. I want to hear. So then you have to keep reading because he's going to talk about that eventually. Like, he calls his sister the brass monkey for about like 4 chapters before you even get to her birth. And you're like, why is she called the brass monkey? Why? This makes no sense. And then you get on and it, kind of makes sense. But I found this was a very long read. When you have to read it in 2 weeks and it's almost 600 pages, it was a very long read, but it was very good. So at least, like, I liked reading it. I just was under a time crunch and it was hard to kind of enjoy it in full. But this is probably a book I would consider like buying, like keeping, like getting my own copy because I thought it was very interesting. And this one deals with India and India's independence and all of Pakistan and all of that stuff that was going on with Basically, the main character Salim is born at the stroke of midnight on August 15, 1947, when India's Independence Day, essentially. And it kind of all revolves around that and how Salim is connected to India and connected to the events that the country takes place. So it's very interesting. It's really very interesting, and it deals with like powers and supernatural powers and stuff like that. How all of the kids born on that Independence Day between midnight and 1 in the morning all have some sort of supernatural power. Yeah, I don't know, it's very, like I said, it's very interesting. I was at a time crunch, so I couldn't enjoy it as much as I'd like to, but I would definitely give this another go. So this is probably my favorite so far out of the like 5 I had to read for that class. And then I just finished this book. It's called Beloved by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison, I think, is pretty famous. I don't know a lot of her books. I actually saw this though. I went to Barnes & Noble and it was there and I was like, I just read that. So this one is the one that I was talking about that's a lot about slavery. She was working on a project that combined a lot of slave narratives and then decided to make this book after reading one where, I don't know, well, I won't say it because I might spoil the book. Anyway, it's about slavery. It's in 1850-ish. Yeah. It takes place around the time that this law was proposed or was put into action that I can't remember what it was called now, we just talked about it in class, but it was a law that even if slaves escaped to the north, they could, and were technically free, their masters could still come back and take them back, even though they were up there and they were free, they could still be taken back. And that's what that law was, and I can't remember what it's called now, but that's what it was. So that's kind of the main focus, or like not the main focus, but it's the underlying background of this book, is that law and, you know, trying to stay safe and keep your children safe. It's very interesting. I liked it a lot. It's a hard read, you know, it's not an easy read, but it's not a long read, and it was very interesting and kept me going. Like, I had time yesterday and I was like, I'll just finish it because it's interesting. So I did, and yeah. It's good. I like this. This copy has a good foreword in it that where Toni Morrison talks a bit about her you know, inspiration for it. So if you're gonna get a copy, I would recommend this one. I think it's the most recent copy out. But yeah. So those are all the books, minus one that I haven't read yet, that I've had to read this semester for my classes, not counting my Japanese textbooks and poems that I've read for my poetry class. But those are books that I've read. I had to do a lot of reading. I was basically reading a new book every week and a half to 2 weeks, which I have not read this many books in probably years. Or if you just want new books to read, I would definitely recommend Midnight's Children, House of the Spirits, Beloved, and The Road. Those are my top 4 that I'd recommend. I mean, obviously you can still check out Arabian Nights and Days and 100 Years of Solitude and the Norton Book of Nature Writing. Those just weren't my favorites, but you know, they're still okay. But I would definitely recommend Midnight's Children, House of Spirits, The Road, Beloved. Those 4. If you're looking for new books to read that are kind of in the adult, I would say adult fantasy. I would kind of categorize magical realism as like adult fantasy, you know, but whatever. But yeah, that was it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you decide to read any of these books, or let me know if you read them already. And let me know what you thought. Like I said, I thought they were pretty cool. That's it for this video. I will see you guys in my next one. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe for more.